Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey through some source material that is intensely philosophical and frankly pretty radical in its whole premise.
It really is.
We're looking at a 1977 address. It was delivered in New York by Sun Myung, and it's titled The Return to Tears.
Yeah, and when you see a title like that, you might expect, a discussion on catharsis or grieving.
Right, the usual stuff.
But the document, it just immediately strips away our typical understanding of emotion.
So our mission with this deep dive is to really unpack a worldview where tears are not just, an emotional reaction.
No, not at all. They're recast as a foundational, even a strategic and necessary tool, a
Yeah.
currency, if you will.
Your currency.
Yeah, a currency that's required for anyone looking to influence human history, or what this source calls the cosmic dispensation.
And the address, it doesn't ease its audience in at all. It immediately sets a very serious tone by challenging the young American listeners of 1977.
That's right. It basically says, you, in your affluent society, you haven't known real suffering.
Wow, straight out of the gate.
That's the starting point.
Mm.
Moon suggests that these young people who grew up without, genuine hardship like hunger or cold,
Yeah.
they may not know what it means to shed real tears.
So he's drawing a line.
A huge line. He asked them, have you only cried for your own problems, or have you actually cried for others? And this establishes a profound lack of depth in their spiritual experience right from the start.
A fundamental selfishness that's sort of baked into their sorrow.
Exactly.
It sets up the tension perfectly. It's basically telling you, the listener, your tears are probably selfish, and we need to fix that.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The first step in this philosophy is a full taxonomy of grief.
Yeah, classification.
Because we learn very quickly, not all tears are created equal.
Precisely. The core distinction that underpins the entire theology here is simple, but absolute. There are two kinds of tears.
Oh.
Those shed for oneself and those shed for others. And the source traces this all the way back to the very moment human history went sideways. All the way back to the fall of man. So tell us, how did the history of tears begin, according to this source?
It began with Adam, Eve, and God right after the spiritual fall. Adam and Eve, they cried for their own misery, their own sin.
For themselves.
Their own impending spiritual death. These were the prototypes of self-centered tears. I mean, they were weeping over the catastrophic loss of their perfect state.
But God also cried, right? The source identifies God as the father of mankind and says he cried too.
He did. The address explains that God shed the tears of goodness and the tears of mercy for Adam and Eve's anguish.
So those were the other-centered tears?
By definition, yes. God wasn't crying for himself. He was crying for the tragedy that had just befallen his creation.
That distinction, crying for my own loss versus crying for the loss suffered by my father or my fellow man, that's a critical philosophical anchor for this whole thing.
It is. So the entire foundation of human history, which is marked by sorrow, is seen as this tragic repetition of those self-centered tears.
While God just keeps weeping over the consequences.
Absolutely. The insight is that man's history of sorrow has been, by default, marked by grieving over one's own immediate suffering. And this cycle, the source argues, it has to be broken.
So how do you break it?
To advance spiritually, to really live a purposeful life, mankind has to advance step by step and eventually go beyond the realm of tears entirely.
Beyond the realm of tears, that implies that tears, at least in their current form, are a necessary phase, but they're not the final destination.
Exactly. And this is where the curiosity about human purpose gets really deep. How do you go beyond them?
And that's the mandate.
That's where the mandate comes in, yes. The destiny is defined by crossing the two hills of tears. The first hill is conquering the tears of man, that self-pity, that narrow grief.
And the second hill.
The second, far greater hill is conquering the tears of God. The ultimate goal is to restore the world to a state so complete that God no longer needs to shed those tears of mercy and anguish.
That is a staggering cosmic goal. I mean, it suggests that human action isn't just about saving individual souls. It's about literally changing God's emotional state.
It requires a complete spiritual reorientation. The source dictates that we have to reverse the default purpose of our tears.
So instead of focusing on our own misery,
we have to align our grief with the grief God shed at the fall. This means moving our focus beyond the self, beyond the needs of our church, even beyond our nation, to weeping for the suffering of all humanity.
And for God's aching heart.
And for God's aching heart, yes.
To make this concept, which is pretty abstract, more concrete, the address gives us the ultimate historical example of this reversal. Jesus Christ.
Jesus is presented as the supreme unselfish weeper. The source highlights a truly jarring image.
Which is,
At the moment of his own agonizing death on the cross, Jesus was focused not on his own pain, but on his adversaries.
specifically the Roman soldiers who were piercing him.
Yes, it's jarring to read that, crying for the Roman soldier. It demands a level of spiritual discipline that, most people can barely even fathom.
He shed his tears and sweat for his enemies.
And by doing that, the source argues, he would win the hearts and respect of even the worst kind of sinful man in history. He was demonstrating pure, unmerited love.
It completely reverses the spiritual calculus. Jesus considered his own well-being last of all. He's being crucified, yet his tears are for humanity and for his persecutors.
And you contrast that with Adam and Eve, who, facing spiritual death, cried only for their own misery.
The one act locked humanity into a cycle of self-pity.
And the other, the act of Jesus, showed the path out.
So if Jesus was the ultimate example of this path, then what went wrong in the 2,000 years that followed? Because the source does not spare conventional faith here.
Not at all.
It states that Christianity forgot its role to share the tears of God.
That is the core claim, and it's a profound critique. The source contends that conventional Christian prayers became too limited. Their scope just stopped at the level of the self, or maybe the local church or the nation.
They weren't global enough.
They rarely extended to praying for all of humanity or for the very heart of God in the context of the larger cosmic dispensation, the divine plan for all of history.
And the source suggests the problem wasn't just laziness, it was the theology itself.
Exactly. If you believe that God is primarily a God of judgment who will eventually destroy the evil and burn the unrighteous, well, that restricts your ability to pray universally.
Of course. If you believe millions are destined for hell, why would you cry for their fate?
Right. And this constraint, Moon argues, meant that conventional Christianity could not produce a man who could truly give himself for the sake of humanity here on earth and in heaven.
So the religious structure itself was, by its own limitation, just incapable of reaching that required level of selfless tears.
Which means a new breed has to emerge and take full responsibility for the cosmic dispensation.
And this is where the address transitions to the mission of the Unification Church, to plunge into the tears of God, to eliminate them entirely.
And this brings us to the unique nature of repentance that's required for this mission. If tears are the essential currency, then repentance must be transacted through them.
But not for your own sins.
No. This repentance is not for you. It's for the sins of humanity and for the aching heart of God.
It's asking for a total spiritual overhaul. You're not just saying sorry for what you did. You're mourning God's pain over all of human history.
Precisely. You have to realize what a miserable, wayward child you and humanity have been, piercing God's heart over and over. And that realization, channeled through other-centered tears, is the critical point.
That's the leap.
That is the gigantic leap from individual self-centered tears to God's universal tears. It's how you can liquidate the entire fallen past.
And the source is incredibly specific about what's required for this to work. It says that without tears, it doesn't matter how much sweat you shed or even blood.
None of it matters.
The effort has nothing to do with God's work. Tears are the essential, non-negotiable link.
They're the catalyst. The source suggests that, sweat is tied to labor and effort, and blood is tied to sacrifice. But tears, specifically the tears of repentance for God and humanity, they are the spiritual life stream.
The currency of recreation?
The currency, yes. They pay the necessary spiritual indemnity. And indemnity here means the payment or sacrifice you need to make to restore something to its original unfallen state.
Okay, so if tears are the currency, where do you spend it? You can't shed God's tears while sitting in a comfortable living room.
No, you have to go to the battleground. That's where the spiritual war is waged against what the source terms Satan.
And what does that mean in practical terms?
It means actively disturbing the world, taking people and wealth and power to the side of God.
That sounds aggressive, but the source is clear. This isn't about physical violence.
No, absolutely not. It's a spiritual plundering done exclusively through the word and love of God. The argument is that the fall began with words, with lies from the adversary.
So only truth can reverse it.
Only truth and true love, delivered with tears, can reverse that process and retrieve what was lost. The action is disturbing the current arrangement of the world by introducing a higher principle.
The address also tackles the issue of prejudice head-on. It demands a pretty massive perspective shift among its members to be effective on this battleground.
Yes, Members are instructed that they must be colorblind because God is colorblind. And here's a crucial observation from the source.
Go on.
It notes that oppressed people, and it specifically mentions black people, they actually have a better chance to see and cry God's tears.
And why is that? Why are they better equipped?
Well, the source suggests that misery creates a kind of low-pressure system, a spiritual vulnerability, you could say. And the high spiritual pressure of God's love and sorrow will naturally rush into that space.
So those who have suffered are more receptive.
Exactly. Those who have experienced profound suffering are already familiar with the feeling of injustice and anguish. It makes them more receptive to sharing God's ultimate historical pain. They're sort of preconditioned to relate to suffering that goes beyond just themselves.
That shifts the discussion from a purely theological, abstract idea to an extremely urgent, boots-on-the-ground mission.
It does.
And this massive cosmic mandate, surprisingly, gets grounded right here in a very specific place in 1977, New York City.
New York was declared the spiritual front line. The source explains that the best members were mobilized globally to come there with urgency.
And the mission was immediate.
Immediate. Saving America, which, despite all its affluence, was deemed spiritually poor in tears.
And nonchalant and unconcerned about its deep spiritual situation.
Yes, and the work itself was granular and incredibly specific. It was called the 360 Home Mission.
The measurable objective.
Exactly. Members were tasked with visiting 360 homes, but not just as missionaries. They were going as God's official representatives, arriving after many thousands of years of ordeal.
Just think of the pressure that puts on the individual.
The pressure is immense, especially given the catastrophic consequences for failure.
What were they?
The source makes the accountability crystal clear. Failure to visit those 360 homes makes the messenger personally responsible for the fate of those people in this New Age exodus.
A New Age exodus. I mean, that's a powerful reference.
It is. It implies that the messenger is acting as a modern-day Moses or Messiah to those families, guiding them out of a spiritual Egypt.
Stepping back to the broader international stage, the source outlines this ambitious two-part strategy for dealing with communism.
Which in 1977 was seen as the single greatest barrier to world unification.
Because, as Moon argues, no rational communication is possible with it.
Right. So the strategy is split between the spiritual and the practical. First, the spiritual approach. Since political reasoning won't work, members must tearfully pray and pay indemnity for communists.
So they can be spiritually unchained.
Exactly. It goes right back to crying even for your adversary.
And the practical strategic approach.
That is, to build an ideal religious society in the free world as an undeniable superior example, a beacon of love and truth.
And the idea was that the success of the society would cause communism to collapse from within.
Inevitably, yes. It would lead to internal communist problems, economic catastrophe, famine. They would collapse from within without a single shot being fired. The superiority of the model would win, not military might.
We also get a huge glimpse into the grand plan for the global IOWC, that's the International One World Crusade. This vision for the late 70s was just enormous.
It was a shocking projection of scale. The plan called for a global IOWC force of 10,000 members by 1978 or 1979.
Which would require, what, 30 jumbo jets?
The address notes it would require 30 jumbo jets just for transportation. The goal was to deploy this massive force globally to awaken millions, recalling a prior rally in Korea that allegedly drew 1.2 million people.
And the vision was incredibly ambitious for its public image, too. The IOWC was planned to be known as a Peace Corps in the truest sense.
Right. It would become America's pride, with nations competing for them to visit.
And tying this global leadership back to the philosophy, the members selected for this huge task would have to pass a rigorous test.
A test in the divine principle, the foundational textbook of the Unification Church, recognizing it as the quickest, most direct path to achieving this promised worldwide leadership.
So if we step back and summarize the central finding here, we find a life philosophy that's defined entirely by sacrificial suffering.
Absolutely. Misery isn't avoided. It's welcomed as an opportunity for spiritual expansion.
Tears are not a sign of weakness.
They're the essential currency, the life stream for spiritual restoration. And the path is grueling. The source recounts the vertical discovery of truth through tears, putting yourself in the position of historic figures like Noah or Abraham.
And linking that directly to horizontal restoration.
Which is paying the debts of the past through action.
And the mandate comes with this incredible urgency, demanding that the entire path be followed, even if it means giving up fundamental needs like eating and sleeping.
because the source warns that the consequences of your failure will be catastrophic.
The stakes just could not be higher.
That urgency is the constant driver of the whole mission. And this brings us to the final, provocative thought the source presents. It's the ultimate measure of a life well lived.
And that is?
The address asks, are you a person for whom God can shed tears?
That shifts the entire equation of piety. It's no longer about seeking God's love or grace.
No. It's about actively inspiring God's emotional response.
It suggests that the real measure of a person is how much their thoughts and their deeds can make God cry.
It is. And not crying tears of anguish, but maybe tears of joy or final relief. What would it take for you to become that important in the cosmic dispensation, for your actions to finally wipe away the historical tears of God?
We'll leave that for you to mull over.